There is a piece of land under the Indian Ocean that has no business being there. 3 billion years old. Continental rock. Sitting beneath an island that is only 9 million years old. An island made of nothing but young volcanic lava. The old rock should not exist under the young island. But it does. Geologists pulled the crystals out of the ground, dated them twice in 2 separate laboratories, and the numbers came back the same. Buried down there, underwater that legend says drowned a civilization, is the crushed remnant of a lost continent. They gave it a name, Mauritia. And it sits almost exactly where, for over a century, people have insisted a second Atlantis went down. Not the Atlantis, its enemy. Because before Mauritia had a scientific name, it had an older one, Lemuria, a drowned landmass in the Indian Ocean, home to a civilization that, according to a story told in a dozen cultures across the planet, went to war with Atlantis and lost. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The people who named Lemuria in the 1800s were not mystics. They were scientists. They proposed a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean using nothing but fossils and logic. And in 2013, other scientists, working with sonar and radiometric dating, found continental crust drowned in the exact ocean the first ones pointed at. That is where we start. A real sunken continent in the right place that nobody was supposed to find. From there, it only gets stranger. 2 lost worlds, 1 weapon, and a scar of destruction that shows up on the same coastlines, in the same layer of Earth, all the way around the globe. Most people walk right past all of it. Let me show you what they missed. It begins with a puzzle about the least threatening animal on Earth. In 1858, a zoologist named Philip Sclater noticed something that should have been impossible: lemurs. Their fossils appeared in Madagascar, in India, in Africa, even scattered towards South America. Places separated by thousands of miles of open ocean. And lemurs do not swim. Identical species do not simply appear on opposite sides of the sea. So Sclater asked the only question that fit the evidence. What if there used to be land, a bridge, a whole continent that once connected those coastlines and then vanished under the water? In 1864, he published it in a scientific journal, and he gave the drowned continent a name drawn from the animal that revealed it: Lemuria. The mainstream story says Sclater was simply wrong. That plate tectonics explained the fossils without any sunken continent, and Lemuria became a footnote, a Victorian mistake. For a long time, that was the end of it. But that explanation has a problem. Because the ocean floor did not read the memo, when geologists studied the tiny volcanic island of Mauritius east of Madagascar, they found minerals far too old to belong there. Zircon crystals dated between 2.5 and 3 billion years, locked inside rock only a few million years old. Zircons like that only form in the granite hearts of ancient continents. There is no ancient continent on Mauritius. There was supposed to be nothing under it but young ocean crust. The team followed the anomaly and reconstructed what the crystals were telling them. A fragment of continental crust, drowned when India tore away from Madagascar and the Indian Ocean opened. They named it Mauritia, and they mapped it as one of possibly many splinters of drowned land scattered across the seafloor. The shattered pieces of something much larger, a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, exactly where a discredited Victorian had drawn one from the tracks of a small climbing animal. Not similar, not nearby. The same ocean, the same idea. Buried proof for a theory the textbooks had already thrown away. That is the first clue, and it is only the crust. Now we get to the people who were supposed to have lived on it. Here is where it gets strange. Because Sclater's continent did not stay a scientific curiosity for long. In 1888, a Russian writer named Helena Blavatsky took the name Lemuria and built an entire lost history on top of it. She described the Lemurians as an ancient race, giants, who lived on the continent long before recorded history and were finally destroyed in a cataclysm of fire and water. Volcanoes shattering the land, the islands sinking into the sea, a whole world erased. It reads like pure invention, and much of it may be. But watch what happens when you set her account beside completely unrelated traditions from the other side of the planet. Because a British writer named James Churchward was, at the same time, describing a different sunken continent he called Mu, placed across the Pacific from Hawaii nearly to Japan. When others compared the two stories, they collapsed into one. Lemuria and Mu became the same drowned civilization, killed the same way, in a single night of earthquakes and fire and water swallowing everything. And Churchward pointed at physical things still standing to prove it. The Yonaguni Monument, off Japan, massive stepped stone terraces underwater, found by a diver in 1986. Nan Madol in Micronesia, a real megalithic city built on artificial islands out of stone logs, with a canal system and, revealed by recent LiDAR scans, engineered channels for fresh water and waste. Nobody knows for certain who built it, or how they moved the stone. And then Easter Island, a speck of rock in the middle of the Pacific that somehow held thousands of people and covered itself in giant statues. Mainstream science says they crossed the ocean in canoes, and they may well have. But the Lemuria story asks a different question. What if there was once land under those waves and they simply walked? If you want to know what supposedly destroyed all of this and why the same scar shows up on coastlines worldwide, subscribe now, because this investigation is about to move from a lost continent to the weapon that legend says sank it. Because every one of these traditions, Blavatsky, Churchward, the Tamil accounts, all of them agree on one thing. Lemuria did not simply erode away. It was destroyed, suddenly, violently, in as little as a single night. And that is where the story stops being about a place and starts being about a war. The claim comes from a cluster of esoteric texts, and I want to be clear that this is legend, not laboratory. But the legend is specific. It says there were two great civilizations, Atlantis, beyond the Pillars of Heracles in the west, and Lemuria in the east, and they disagreed about one thing: how to rule the world. Atlantis, in the story, wanted to dominate every tribe and culture on Earth. Lemuria wanted the world's peoples left alone to develop on their own. Lemuria told Atlantis to withdraw. Atlantis refused. And Atlantis, the story says, chose war. Now hold that against the one source everyone actually trusts: Plato. Around 360 BCE, in the Timaeus and the Critias, he set down the account of Atlantis, and he did not present it as a fable. He framed it as history, handed from Egyptian priests at Sais to the Athenian Solon, and passed down through his own family. Plato's Atlantis is an island power beyond the Pillars of Heracles, larger than Libya and Asia combined. A civilization of rings, alternating bands of water and land, walls faced in red and white and black stone, and a gleaming metal called orichalcum that shone like fire. And Plato's Atlantis is not peaceful. It is an aggressive empire that marches east to enslave the Mediterranean, until it is stopped and destroyed. An Eastern war fought by Atlantis, ending in the sea, the same shape as the Lemuria legend, written down 2,000 years before anyone coined the name Lemuria. And Plato gives a date: 9,000 years before Solon, roughly 9,600 BCE. Read that number as a measurement, not a myth, and it lands on one of the most violent moments in the planet's recent history: the end of the last ice age. For decades, scholars dismissed that date as symbolic exaggeration. Then modern science found something that changed everything. Because around that time, the Ice Age ended, and it did not end gently. The vast ice sheets of the northern world collapsed into the oceans, and global sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Coastlines did not creep. In places, they leapt inland by hundreds of miles. Entire regions of habitable land, exactly the kind of low coastal plain where early people cluster, went under and stayed under. This is not legend. This is documented Earth history. The meltwater pulses at the close of the Pleistocene. And the memory of that drowning survives in flood stories on nearly every inhabited continent. A lost world swallowed by rising water is not one culture's fantasy. It is a near universal human memory. Plato was not inventing a date. He may have been recording one. Now push on the war itself. The legend says Lemuria and Atlantis were destroyed not by an asteroid or the sun, but by each other. It describes Atlantean technology that should not exist for another 12,000 years. Flying craft powered by fire crystals, energy beams drawn from the Earth itself, weapons that could level mountains, and the American mystic Edgar Cayce, decades before anyone could check him, described the same thing. A great crystal, a firestone, in a domed power station, its rays focused through prisms to power vehicles across land, sea, and air. In the legend, that power became a weapon. The war burned the world. Rivers changed course. Mountains changed height. The earth grew unstable, and both continents went down. It is easy to laugh at fire crystals, but hold on to one detail. In 1939, Cayce stated that evidence of Atlantis would surface near Bimini in the Bahamas. In 1968, divers found the Bimini Road, a long line of massive, oddly rectangular stone blocks on the seafloor, exactly where he pointed. Mainstream geologists call it natural beach rock. Maybe it is, but the man named the spot 29 years early. So, does any of this prove that two lost continents fought a war with energy weapons and sank each other beneath the sea? No. And you should be suspicious of anyone who tells you it does. The sources for the war are unreliable, and they contradict each other. Blavatsky, Churchward, Cayce. A man named Daniel Fry, who claimed alien abduction and then failed a polygraph, lied about his credentials, and got caught faking photographs. The zircons under Mauritius date the continent to 84 million years ago, tens of millions of years before any human, which means Mauritia sank long before anyone could have lived on it or fought over it. The lemur fossils are better explained by plate tectonics than by a bridge. Every dramatic thread, examined alone, phrase. But here's what the skeptical version still cannot explain away. The debunk kills the fire crystals. It does not touch the coastlines. There really was a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, and we found it. There really was a global flood at the end of the Ice Age that rose more than 100 meters and drowned the world's coasts. And there really are cities under that water. In 2001, off the coast of Gujarat, a survey team from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was running routine pollution checks in the Gulf of Khambat when their sonar picked up something it was not looking for. Geometric structures on the seabed, 120 feet down, stretching across miles. Grids, walls, foundations. They dredged up pottery, worked material, even human remains. And a piece of wood from the site carbon dated to around 9,500 years old. Older than the pyramids, older than Sumer, a city drowned at the end of the Ice Age at very nearly the date Plato gave for Atlantis. They call it Dwarka, after a city Hindu legend said the sea reclaimed thousands of years ago. For 1,000 years, that was just a story. Then the sonar found the walls. And the Tamil people of southern India never needed convincing at all. They have their own name for the drowned land. Kumari Kandam, a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, between India and Madagascar, ruled by an ancient line of kings, swallowed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. The same ocean the lemurs pointed at. The same ocean where the zircons say a continent went down. A legend and a geological fact. describing the same grave. Every discovery in this story arrived by accident. Mauritia, from crystals in the wrong rock. Yanaguni, a diver looking for sharks. Dwarka, a pollution survey. Nobody set out to find any of it. It was simply there, waiting under the sea. Which raises the only question that matters. How much more is down there that nobody has stumbled across yet? Because if even the grounded version of this is right, if coastal civilizations were flourishing on land the Ice Age flood erased, then our history is missing a chapter. It would mean people were building cities thousands of years earlier than we credit anyone, on shorelines now 100 meters underwater, and that the flood did not just drown their homes. It erased them from the record so completely that we spent thousands of years calling the survivors' memories mere myth. The war between Atlantis and Lemuria is almost certainly a story. The drowned world underneath it is not, and most of that world has never been looked at. The continental shelves that flooded at the end of the Ice Age are enormous, and almost none of the seafloor has been mapped in the detail it would take to find a buried wall. Mauritia is still down there, crushed under the Indian Ocean, mostly unexplored. Dwarka has never been fully excavated. The Cuban Formation, found in 2001 at 2,000 feet, has barely been touched. The permits are slow, the funding evaporates. The ocean keeps its secrets by being too deep and too wide to search. Tonight, while the boats come in and the tide turns, the drowned continent will do what it has done for millions of years. It will sit in the dark, under the Indian Ocean, 3 billion-year-old crystals locked in silence, over the same water that legend says closed over an entire civilization in a single night. Two lost worlds, one flood we can prove. Somewhere down there, under the sediment, the walls of a city nobody has ever named are still standing in the dark, still drowned, still waiting. If you want to know what else the ancient world built before the water took it, watch the next investigation on screen right now.